This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
For the first time in history, we've actually got a bracket to break down for the college football playoff. It is a 12-team bracket. We're going to break it all down today by bringing back one of our favorites. Dr. Ed Feng is with us here today, breaking down his thoughts on the bracket. We're going to talk some bracket pool strategy too, because apparently there are bracket pools you can fill out for this year too. Ed's a master of college basketball, so we'll try to apply some of his knowledge to the football side of things as well. We'll talk some futures that Ed likes based on the odds at FanDuel Sportsbook and take a first look at the round one games as well. This is Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is JimSannes. I'm a managing editor of FanDuel Research, joined here as mentioned by Dr. Ed Feng. You can find his work at thepowerrank.com. Check him out on X at thepowerrank. And, of course, check out all his fantastic college football and college basketball and NFL work over thepowerrank.com as well. Ed, we got a playoff. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm really looking forward to the first college football playoff. I think we got a great field. I think we got a lot of awesome stories in this, and I'm pumped to break it down with you.
I am as well, because if we're going to talk brackets, Ed, there is no one I would want to discuss it with more than you, because you've written the book on how to break down a college basketball bracket. 12-team football bracket, definitely a bit different, but I'm excited to kind of pick your brain on what should be a really unique year for us.
Yeah, it should be a really unique year, and the principles should apply to any type of tournament structure, so let's break it down.
We're going to break it all down. We'll talk about Ed's reaction to the rankings here first, and we'll go through his thoughts on strategy for filling out a bracket pool, because I know that ESPN at least does have bracket pools posted, so you can fill out those. And we'll talk about some futures at FanDuel Sportsbook, whether Ed likes any national championship bets right now, and much more to get you ready for this first ever 12-team college football playoff. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. Jam-packed week here on the show. We're going to talk some NFL Week 15 best bets with Megan Payton tomorrow, and then NFL player props with Annie Nader on Friday. Both those here on the Covering the Spread podcast feed. So search for Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. Hit subscribe. And if you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating and review as well. And of course, all these shows streamed live on our brand new YouTube page as well. Subscribe there, enable notifications, and leave us a thumbs up if you like what you hear. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern, breaking down NFL DFS Week 15 with Brandon Gadula. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, an affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in DC. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or visit FanDuel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/Chat in Connecticut. Visit M&D Gambling Health in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Now, Ed, we'll talk about the bracket here in a second. First, I did want to get your thoughts on the reaction to the bracket here first, because the committee, obviously a lot of discussion about that since then. I kind of thought it made sense, personally, a lot of things that they did. What were your reactions to the actual bracket once it was revealed?
Right. I mean, I try not to have too many reactions. I really could care less whether it's SMU or Alabama in the playoff. It's my job to take that bracket and to calculate some odds and win probabilities and so on and so forth. I do think, it's never really the best teams. They always talk about the best teams, but it's not the best teams. You have to be deserving too. And when you lose 3 games, and the last of which was by more than 3 touchdowns at Oklahoma, you're going to have a precarious time trying to get into a 12-team playoff. And now you're stuck in the Who Cares Bowl against Michigan, which should actually get some pretty good ratings on I think it's New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
Which should be pretty nice. So, I don't really concern myself too much with those final rankings. I mean, the committee can kind of do whatever they want. I will note that I find it very interesting that Boise State is the 3 seed. They play in the Mountain West, and Ashton Genty is awesome, the running back who's been racking up yards. I will only say that, man, the rush defenses that he plays in the Mountain West are a little bit lacking in quality, shall we say. So it's going to be interesting to see what he can do against better teams. I find it interesting that Boise State was ranked 3rd. They are the 3 seed when my numbers have them as the 37th best team in the country. They are by far the worst team in the field, not Clemson. So a big mismatch there. I will make them the dog when they play. So we'll see how that shakes out.
Yeah, I pulled a couple different sources for power ratings for college football to just kind of get a blend. It was using the Ed Feng approach of wisdom of the crowds, try to decipher what they said about the field, and did include, of course, the power rank in there as well. And when you look at a blended power rating model, Boise State was dead last by about 6 points. 6 points worse than Arizona State, and Clemson was above both those. So Clemson winds up being the 5th ranked conference winner, below Arizona State and Boise State, despite the fact that Boise State was a pretty significant amount worse. Actually, the blended number for Boise State was only 3 points worse than Arizona State. So it's still a gap, and they were a tier below the rest. So kind of like you said, it's always going to be results-based, but I thought that one specifically was, that specific ranking was more results-based than the other ones were.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great approach, and I'm glad you're getting the same results. I can't remember off the top of my head where I'd put the point spread in their first round of game, but they won't be favored. I don't think the markets will not favor them in that game. I don't know how big the spread will be, but yeah, they're a Mountain West team. I mean, they're a great program. They could win a game, but don't count on it.
Yeah, if they were to face Penn State on a neutral field, not accounting for rest, it'd be 11.5 points in favor of Penn State in that situation. Again, not accounting for rest, which does matter. But if you're not accounting for that, 11.5 point spread for the team that got the bye, that's pretty interesting for sure with the way the bracket shook out there. So kudos to Penn State for getting the nice draw there. Good luck for them. Now, Ed, let's talk about bracket pool strategy, because there actually are some bracket pools posted at various sites already. You've got some time to fill them out still, because the first games are not until next week. So a lot of time to kind of dissect this, to digest the bracket. It's the first time we've done this for college football. Now, you've got a ton of experience doing it on the basketball side of things, but when you're looking at a 12-team field from a strategy perspective, if people enter these bracket pools for this, how should strategy differ versus how you fill things out for a 68-team basketball field?
I think a lot of the principles are the same. It doesn't matter if it's 12 teams or 68 teams. You got to look at the structure of what the pool is like, and if it's something that goes exponentially, like if you're getting a lot more points for the champion than you are for the first round games, then your choice of champion is the most important one, and you're going to make that choice of champion based on kind of how big your pool is, and so on and so forth. We can kind of go through all that, and I'm happy to. Before we get into that, Jim, I'm actually more interested to see what people are interested in, right? I mean, I've spent a decade giving out bowl pool advice where you're picking a single game and they're all weighted equally, and whether you're picking a winner or a spread, and a lot of people have done really well with some of my methods for that, but the strategy can be completely different than in a pool. So I don't think anyone cares about bowls anymore. I feel pretty confident about that, where you're trying to figure out who the heck is playing and who's opting out, and who's going in the transfer portal, and who's going in the transfer portal yet staying and still gonna. I think I just saw that the SMU backup quarterback is in the portal, but he's staying with SMU for the playoff run. So yeah, I don't know what people are doing. Feel free to hit me up on social media about that. But yeah, hopefully there'll be a lot of interesting opportunities for this 2024 college football postseason.
Well, I think that it's a nice thing here to kind of have the playoff now in, given that bowls, I'm assuming, you've probably seen this as far as like interest in the bowl pools has probably dwindled over years
Yep.
as opt-outs have increased, ever since, the Christian McCaffrey, Leonard Fournette year where all the opt-outs really
Right.
started to become a major thing. Bowl pool interest probably decreases. And now suddenly we got a thing where every team will be trying their hardest. We're not going to have opt-outs from the tournament. So like, I feel like it kind of just is a natural kind of replacement. And to me, it's probably a better replacement even because even when there were bowls were big, there were still motivation gaps between one team and another. Like, disappointment in Alabama having to face Michigan in their bowl game. Are they going to care even if there are no opt-outs, no transfers and stuff like that? It's a disparate situation where one team may care a lot more. And in this situation, we know for a fact both teams are going to push. So I feel like it's kind of the best case scenario for us as college football fans.
Yeah, it's for sure the best case scenario with the playoff. It's going to be great. Like you said, everyone's going to be motivated if, you're going to play through injuries as if it's like your most important game of the year, and it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, it definitely will be for sure. And part of the reason why it's exciting is because there is no real clear favorite for this year. So let's take a look at the betting odds for the championship right now. And part of this is because of the way the draw worked out, where Oregon is the 1 seed, but has a tougher path than some teams on the lower end of the bracket. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, both Texas and Oregon are plus 360 to win. Georgia 5-1, given the Carson Beck uncertainty there. Ohio State 5-1. Penn State plus 550. So no real favorite here, Ed. When you look at the college national championship futures, any value stand out to you as of right now?
A little bit. My numbers really like the Big Ten teams right now. The top 4 teams in my member rankings are all from the Big Ten. The value, I don't think there's a ton of value, but I think there's a little bit of value in Oregon at plus 360. I've been talking about Penn State actually kind of all season as, this is the year of parity in college football. The top 6 teams in my member numbers are separated by 5 points. That's not a lot. And that doesn't even include what the team that's probably the most talented team in this field in Georgia. So there's the possibility for some very unexpected results. And I think Penn State can be the team that really delivers on those results. And everyone's like, James Franklin can't beat any top 5 teams. Well, you can't beat top 5 teams until you actually do it. And he's going to have plenty of opportunities to do it. I live here in Ann Arbor amongst the Michigan crowd, and everyone likes to hate on James Franklin. I think he's a really good coach. He's at that program as a top 10 program for over a decade. So my numbers definitely see a little bit of value in Penn State. I wish it were a little bit higher than plus 550.
Yeah.
Right. I wish the betting markets and the sharp bettors would buy into this, 1 in 18 against top 5 teams a little bit more, like get 7-1, 8-1. This is statistically, this is a really good Penn State team. It's a very talented team on both sides of the ball. Even the passing numbers are pretty solid. I like the chances. You got to get away from the narratives, and just look at the possibilities of this team, and it's a really good team.
Well, our YouTube producer, Justin Lane, is a Penn State fan, and he chimed in on the YouTube comment saying, always listen when Ed speaks. So you've won Justin over Ed by speaking glowingly of Penn State. And I think that part of the issue with Penn State has always been the quarterback play never gave them upside. But I kind of think we've seen upside out of Aller, especially honestly in that loss to Oregon. It kind of seemed like he had a bit more to provide there than other quarterbacks have given them in the past. So they might not need that right away. They're facing SMU in the first round, Boise State second round if they were to win. Then when you get to either Notre Dame or Georgia, that's where the upside discussion may matter. So you may not have to care about upside until the third round. And when they get there, I do think that at least in those situations, when you're going up against either, whatever Georgia winds up doing with the Carson Beck situation or Riley Leonard, I think the Aller actually can kind of compare there. So once you get to the national championship, that's actually an okay path for Penn State, which I think is part of why I'm not getting a better number on them, is because the path is so good and people are aware of that. But I do think that having a quarterback who has at least some upside in Aller does shift the discussion around Penn State a pretty significant amount.
I would agree with that. I talked about this in I don't even know what to call it. It's like my the Power Ranks college football win probabilities. So if you go sign up for my free newsletter, you'll get a copy of my PDF. It'll give you all my numbers so you can, check that there's actually value on Oregon plus 360 based on the numbers and Penn State plus 550. But I talk about how this is kind of wide open because this is just a terrible quarterback class.
Yeah.
And when you look at the top 3 projected quarterbacks in the NFL draft, they're all shut out of the playoff, right?
Yeah.
Shedeur Sanders of Colorado, Jalen Milroe, and Cam Ward. Yeah. So none of them are in the playoff. The next quarterback is Quinn Ewers, who I am impressed with. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he's got a really good pocket presence and awareness. But the numbers kind of hate him, by passing success rate adjusted for opponent. Texas is very close to FBS average. And then the next guy on the list is Drew Aller. Yeah. And kind of surprisingly, he had a lot of questions to answer coming into the season. Was very conservative in that offense last year. And this year, they're top 5 when I look at passing success rate adjusted for opponent. Statistically, this Penn State team is top notch. And I think that kind of supports what you're saying with the upside. And look, I mean, you can just if we had this conversation at the beginning of the year, Drew Aller is an upside quarterback that can lead his team to a national championship. You would laugh, but that's where we are in 2024. Right. It could be a really wild ride in this playoff.
Yeah, I think you could honestly argue that the top 4 quarterbacks for this year are not, because I don't think everyone else will like him. So I'll put this out there now, but I like Jackson Dart quite a bit too. But he didn't make it for Ole Miss. So I think that he's pretty fun too. We've got Ewers, you got Arch Manning filtering in there. Carson Beck is banged up. Dylan Gabriel is very, very good, but doesn't have that the same pro potential because of his age. So it's it is a weird discussion where we bet on quarterbacks, and it's just a different year for that.
Yeah, the Dylan Gabriel thing is really interesting too, because yes, it's an age, but if he were better, he would have gone in the draft the last couple of years, right? He wouldn't be playing his 6th year in college football. And I was actually reading up on this a little bit, and the idea is he's just a mid in terms of his athleticism and his arm strength. And part of me is dude, this guy was dropping bombs over 2 of the best pass defenses in the entire nation in Ohio State and Penn State. What else do you want the guy to do?
Right.
I think he's a really good quarterback.
Yeah.
The numbers that I cited in terms of the top quarterbacks in the next draft, they're not something I pulled out of my rear end. These are from Benjamin Robinson, who does Wisdom of Crowds types estimate to predict. So definitely shout out to him. Check out what he does on Twitter. Check out Grinding the Mocks as we get closer to the draft, which I think is a pretty important tool. But it's a weak quarterback class.
Yeah, for sure. And we don't even get the top end guys in here, as you said. So it's even weaker than the actual quarterback classes itself. Now, a lot of other markets we can look at too, Ed, not just the national championship, but also we can bet on who will make the semifinals, teams to make the championship game and stuff like that as well. So you're buying into Penn State to win the whole thing. Any other non-championship outrights or futures you see as values of FanDuel Sportsbook right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is all just, it's pretty correlated to how they're going to do in the championship. I haven't looked at any of these numbers in particular. Look, I think one thing that I should mention is I like the idea of finding value on Georgia. This was the number 1 team coming into the 2024 college football season. Georgia's always super talented, and it's been really difficult to evaluate them because the defense we expect to be a Kirby Smart, elite defense. And, numbers wise, they're number 10 when I look at success rate allowed, but it's really been up and down. They've either been phenomenal against a Clemson or Texas in that first game, or they've been dreadful in other games. And we know that there's the talent on that side of the ball to just dominate, right? And so can they do that for 4 games? Yeah, absolutely. And now we have the whole Carson Beck situation. We don't know what he's, whether he can play with the whole arm and all that. And then it's also complicated too, because Georgia really has found 0 replacements for Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey. These guys are just crushing it in the NFL. And when you look at just their skill position, players, it's very un-Georgia like, right? Like none of these guys are playing at the next level, yet they're still pretty efficient. I think Mike Bobo's done a pretty good job. So there is a ton of potential with this Georgia team. Carson Beck comes back, he's efficient. That Georgia defense probably has the highest ceiling of any unit, in this entire field. So I think they're interesting.
Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, Georgia is currently plus 192 to make the championship game. And I think the issue with that is that if Beck were to miss time, it's most likely to be the earlier games. So you're if you're going to go that far, you might as well bet them to win the championship too, because you're kind of assuming that they're undervalued in that market. So you kind of have to decide things. Okay, how do I want to play things when I consider the dynamics associated with Beck's injury, his timeline? We don't have a lot of credible reporting on what his injury is to the elbow. I saw UCL, but I didn't see that verified by people I trust. So I guess we haven't gotten a firm answer on that, which kind of makes it tough to decide how to exploit the potential, like you said, for Georgia to be undervalued.
The play that he hurt himself on was, it looked pretty bad. It looked a lot like Brock Purdy in the NFC Championship game a couple years ago. And, Purdy was ready by the beginning of next season.
Right.
I think, I don't know. I don't know what to expect.
Yeah, I don't really either, but it's an interesting dynamic. And like you said, I guess for me, they're not really dependent on Beck to be viable because it is really more about their ground game, and their ground game's healthier now than it was before. So that's encouraging. ETN was back for that game against Texas too. Their defense was stout in that one to keep them in that game despite Beck's injury. So you're kind of betting on the non-quarterback factors anyway.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you brought that up because I think the ground game is an interesting thing. No one on that team, actually, except for Carson Beck, with significant carries is averaging 5 yards per carry. I mean, we know ATN's got a lot of potential.
Right.
They've given a lot of carries to Nate Frazier, freshman that I haven't checked, but I'm sure was a high recruit because that's the only kind of running backs that ever make it onto that team. None of those guys have averaged 5 yards a carry.
Right. That's wild. But the upside is there for them to improve for sure. So potentially buying into Georgia, depending on which mark you prefer for them as well. Let's take a look at, while we have you here, might as well take a look at the first round games as well. So those are all posted at FanDuel Sports. But a lot of hypothetical matchups are posted as well if you dig in for those. But let's take a look at the first round games, Ed. We're talking here on the Wednesday before, 2 Wednesdays before we actually get kickoff for these initial games. Any round one bets catching your eye as of right now?
I haven't looked at these games yet, so I haven't done the deep dive. I will get into that next week. I will tell you that I'm pretty sure I saw 10.5 for this Notre Dame number, and that was the only game that my numbers suggested value in. And I mean, it's gone 3 points already. That is definitely a game that I will look at. You have to, Notre Dame was a team that we expected to be here. A pretty good program under Marcus Freeman right now. I don't think Riley Leonard can throw a football, but he's pretty good running it. So I think that's a really solid team. And Indiana's had a phenomenal season, but then you have to balance that with the fact that they got 0 votes in the preseason AP poll. Like no one expected this team to have the talent to do this. And we spin all these stories about what a genius that the coach is and what he's done with these players that he brought over from James Madison. And he's done phenomenal. I really liked Michigan State to cover against Indiana. It was a bet I really liked. Michigan State looked good on both sides of the ball by a lot of my underlying metrics, and Indiana absolutely crushed them. So I think there's a lot of interesting things to consider there. So obviously, if you consider just the talent of Indiana, you look at this preseason polls, you would like Notre Dame to advance and probably cover a big number, but they've played pretty well. And in college football, you can follow momentum. And the momentum really likes Indiana. So I think that's the most interesting game.
It's interesting too, because we had one of our first shows with Bud Elliott, and he does the blue chip ratio where he looks at the quality of recruits. And that's kind of the same thought process you use with the AP poll, where you're trying to quantify talent and, quantify what people who have knowledge of this roster say about them. And Indiana's blue chip ratio probably is not going to be a standout. I think we can say that pretty safely. And that's probably going to matter more when they're facing stiffer competition, which they get in Notre Dame off the jump. So I feel like the stuff that you talked about before with the with looking at preseason polling and stuff like that, it can matter a lot more for teams that have not really been tested as much. And that's kind of what we get here with Indiana against Notre Dame.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the only comparable that Indiana has played is Ohio State. That was a game where the final score probably should have been a little closer. There were some mistakes by Indiana, but that's the level and intensity of game that you're going to get. Indiana's on the road. How are they going to handle that? We'll see.
We will see for sure, but that game should be a fun one. The first game to kick things off, that is next Friday night. That is all that we have here for today with Ed. As mentioned, he talked about his rankings. You can find those over at thepowerrank.com. The member numbers over there are a true weapon. I've been delighted to be diving into those throughout this entire year. Again, thepowerrank.com to find all those. Ed, what else is going on for you at the Power Rank in the lead up to the first ever 12-team playoff?
For sure. I'm giving away my my win probabilities for the 12-team field. If you sign up for my free newsletter at thepowerrank.com, you will be able to check those out, and as well as my arguments about the volatility of this because of the quarterback situation. So check that out at thepowerrank.com.
All righty. You can find Ed on X at The Power Rank. Find his work at thepowerrank.com. I am on X at JimSannes. You can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. I'm also on Blue Sky at JimSannes as well. Big thank you to our Penn State fan and YouTube producer, Justin Lane, for his work on the video side of things. Thank you, Justin, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in again, back again tomorrow on the YouTube side of things. 10 a.m. talking some DFS, 4 p.m. talking about best bets for NFL Week 15 with Megan Payton. We'll talk to all of you then. This has been Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast.